Our next guest is the former editor and publisher of Gaper's Block, an award-winning Chicago-centric news and events webzine he co-founded in 2003. In addition to Gaper's Block, he has also been a professional blogger for corporate clients, a professor of online journalism, a copywriter for academic websites, and a PR professional for everything from indie rock bands to the Northern Trust. He hosts 20 by 2 Chicago, a show in which 20 interesting people have 2 minutes to each answer one question. And he is, of course, the co-host of Tuesday Funk. Find out what else he's up to at me3dia.com, me3dia. Please welcome Andrew Huff.
Thanks, Eden.
Yeah, welcome.
So the first sentence of this is slightly out of date because in explaining why I shut down Gaper's Block, I definitely wrote more than this. I read this at an event for the Guild Literary Complex, which if you are not familiar, guildcomplex.org, worth checking that out. I read it about a year ago. It still holds true. I tweaked it a little bit since then. This is the longest thing I've written in a long time. That's the first sentence, no longer true. I launched my blog in 2001, back when there were fewer than 1 million of them. As it did for so many, blogging gave me a creative outlet that was much more personal than the press releases and memos I found myself spending my days writing. It was a way to keep my creative mind working, and to keep the color in my words. But after the launch of Gaper's Block, the city blog I co-founded in 2003 with a dozen compatriots and put on an indefinite hiatus a month ago, my focus shifted. Instead of 1,200 or 1,500 words on a topic, I was mostly writing 1 or 2 sentence blurbs and equally brief calendar listings. This was by design. We modeled the front page of Gaper's Block on the Today's News column of the Wall Street Journal. What I didn't anticipate was the effect it would have on my ability to string sentences together. I really didn't notice the change at first. I kept my blog going, but wrote less frequently there and less lengthily. No more 1,500-word posts. Now they were more 500, then 300. Eventually, I picked up a gig running blogs for corporate clients, as it mentioned in my bio, and writing 300-word posts for them in addition to the even shorter stuff for GB. I was getting paid for brevity. And to tell you the truth, brevity is tough. There's a lot of skill in boiling a story down to a couple of paragraphs, and even more skill in the ability to distill it into just 2 sentences. A lot of writers would have an easier time bashing out 1,000 words than picking out the perfect 10. That is, if they actually have to choose their words. You know how supposedly if you spend 10,000 hours doing something, you become a master of it? I have become a master at concise writing. I can write a short, all the livelong day. Give me an assignment for 25 carefully chosen words on a topic, and I'll nail it. The flip side to that 10,000-hour expertise, however, is it can be very difficult to do it any other way than how you've been practicing so hard. A first-chair classical violinist is going to suck at jazz fiddle. If you give me an assignment for 2,000 words right now, it's going to be a real struggle, unless you want it in 1 or 2 paragraph chunks. My mind has been warped and molded into a thoroughbred of brevity and put the old nag of long form out to pasture. In 2006, a social media platform debuted that rewarded brevity. Twitter, I'm sure you're familiar, gives users just 140 characters to work with. Even fewer if you're replying to someone. Naturally, I took to it like a penguin takes to water. Twitter is great. I've always likened it to office chatter. The constant burble of news, gossip, and semi-conscious utterances that travels over cubicle walls and down rows of desks. It's sort of the internet's water cooler. Twitter does have limitations, of course. 140 characters does not leave a lot of room for nuance. And if you follow more than a handful of people, it's easy to catch a tweet out of context. While we can now track a conversation through the breadcrumbs of @replies, there's still no good way of gathering a collection of related tweets that ensures followers read the whole thing. Instead, we write longer elsewhere and link to it in a tweet. Unfortunately, Twitter and Facebook and email and Gaper's Block and all the interruptions of daily life added an additional bad habit to my brain. Now, not only can't I write more than a few sentences to save my life, I have the attention span of a gnat. Now that I can't even tell you how many breaks I had to take just to write this essay. Even if I wasn't flipping back and forth from one social platform to the next, refreshing to see what witty thing my neighbor across the internet cube farm had typed, I get interrupted so often by email and other things, both digital and physical, that it's sometimes difficult to maintain focus long enough to write those two-sentence posts without getting distracted. In spite of it, or possibly because of Twitter's limitations, it's been pressed into service for a variety of literary endeavors. Books such as Moby Dick have been serialized on Twitter. New books have been written on it. Choose your own adventure stories exploit its format. But for the most part, Twitter isn't about carefully selecting one's words. It's more about quick ephemeral thoughts, replies, and exclamations. No need to find the exact right words, just fire off a tweet. Interestingly, there's perhaps no literary form better suited to Twitter than one in which word choice is paramount, the haiku. Twitter turns out to be well positioned to deliver our most economical of poetry genres. It's a rare set of 17 syllables that can't fit into 140 characters. Once Twitter gained the ability to recognize line breaks, it even supported the haiku's traditional English format of 3 phrases, 575. But most importantly, haiku are expected to be internally sufficient, a compact, complete work capable of being evaluated and enjoyed on its own. How perfect for a communication form in which it's rare to see 2 related tweets next to each other. Twitter and haiku were made for each other. Like many Americans, I was introduced to haiku by an English teacher trying to get her students to enjoy poetry. That wasn't much of a challenge with me, but even at a young age, I loved the economy of the form. I was always a slow talker and careful about my word choice, and so it appealed to me in that way too. I returned to the discipline of haiku when I took over co-hosting duties at Tuesday Funk, the eclectic monthly reading series. A tradition had developed before my tenure of the hosts reading something of their own. But as a predominantly journalistic writer who has trouble sustaining a text for more than a couple of paragraphs, I knew it would be a challenge for me to have something substantial to offer every month. But haiku. I was taught that haiku should make a reference to nature or the season. That's not strictly true, especially in non-Japanese poems. But I found inspiration in the idea that a haiku should reflect the world and time at which they are written. So I adopted as my host contribution the seasonal or topical haiku. I often introduce them as being ripped from the headlines, and covered over the past years, my 17 syllables have commented on the news of the day. From the election to Black Friday sales, from the polar vortex to Bill Cosby, nothing has escaped my pencil. Here's a selection of some of my favorites, in no particular order. Ernest Hemingway, it's 5 syllables, was known for daiquiris and extreme brevity. Winter, long in tooth, snarls at the lamb of spring and settles into its lair. Hot Doug's is closing, but not until October. Get encased meats now. Maya Angelou knew why the caged bird sings and told us about it. May she rest in peace, and may we take her lessons to our hearts and minds. A rare double haiku. You are not alone. Big Brother is watching you. There, in your pocket. The full moon rises, the wan color of bone, through cold wisps of cloud. Now that Black Friday starts on Thanksgiving Thursday, watch out, Black Wednesday. Lump of sugar, whiskey, bitters, orange peel. Call me old-fashioned. 50 years later, King's dream is still unfulfilled. Does freedom yet ring? The U.S. haiku department is closed due to government shutdown. Shot on live TV, we're faced with the dilemma of whether to watch. At almost the same moment I started writing my topical haiku, the New York Times launched Times Haiku, an algorithmically driven Tumblr that finds natural haiku hiding in the newspaper's pages. An example. I've never taken that position, and I'm not about to start now. Ross Douthat wrote that in his column March 17 last year about men and marriage trends. I don't know what position he was referring to. Gusts of wind rising, up chimney face below, his feathers the wrong way. That bit of beauty is about a piece on falcons in the city, published March 12th of last year. It has been written by fate of the producers, pick your deity. So Colson Whitehead waxed poetically in a magazine article about reality TV's loser edit, an evocative phrase in itself. Times haiku got me thinking about the role of poetry in the modern age. I'm a journalist, not an English major, so I can't and won't speak about the state of contemporary poetry or its viability as a literary pursuit. But what poetry does so well is offer a unique perspective on the world. It can cause us to see the beauty or absurdity around us, to inform our thinking or alter our feelings. We come away from a poem changed in big ways and small. In the case of Times Haiku, were you not intrigued to read more of the source articles? I find them irresistible, although in most cases they also stand on their own as complete works. In the best of my own haiku, I think I achieved that internal sufficiency. As much as I wish it were easier for me to write long, haiku afford me an opportunity to hone my craft of brevity even further by challenging me to abide by the format's rules and forcing me to look at a story from a different angle, a very different angle. Many require a level of news literacy to understand the sometimes oblique references, while others hit you over the head ever so briefly with their subject matter. But they all cause me to slow down and think carefully about the words I'm putting down. In a weird way, the short attention span friendly format of haiku is helping me reclaim my broken brain. Someday, I might even be able to write a 2,000-word article without having to pause a million times to see what's new in my inbox. This sentence, by the way, only gets me up to just over 1,700. Maybe next time. Thanks. So not used to reading long that my mouth dries out when I read. And on that note, I have a few topical haiku. My want as a co-host here. I have some ripped from the headlines for this month. Life post Gaper's block. The anxiety has gone. Now, what to do next? By the way, if you want to read that longer piece, it's gapersblock.com/goodbye. After Iowa, Trump may blow quieter in New Hampshire tonight. Maybe. 'Twas 5 years ago that Lakeshore Drive became a frozen parking lot. David Bowie, you. Generations of artists owe you a great debt. Thanks.